Hi. During our residency a couple weeks ago, we spent time talking about critical race theory, which we defined as, quote, a paradigm of social science research that assumes racism is a permanent and pervasive part of social structures and that therefore challenges the dominant culture's claims to neutrality or colorblindness, and whose goal is the elimination of racial oppression in societal structures, policies, and practices. Within critical race theory, there are a number of key concepts. The ordinariness of racism, the fact that racism is always present in society. Interest convergence, the notion that seemingly progressive actions against racism often contain within them something to serve the dominant white structure. The fallacy of colorblindness, the fact that we do see color and we need to be honest about it. The institutionalization and the legalization of racist practices within societies and organizations, whether it be the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, the educational system, political system, what have you. And finally, the idea that race itself is not biologically based, but is a social construct. And I want to say a little bit about this idea of race as a social construct. In an article entitled Racial Formation in the United States, renowned sociologists Howard Whiteness and Michael Omi describe race as a social construct, by which they mean it is a complex of social meaning constantly being transformed by political structure. And this article was written in response to a belief that had been held for centuries by scholars, almost exclusively white scholars, which regarded race as primarily a biological category. At one point, these scholars even divided the world into racial types: Caucasoid, Negroid, Mongoloid, and American Indian. They measured brain size, they looked at body types, hair, and other external characteristics. But with the advent of modern genetic testing, when they looked at DNA, they found that the biological basis of race could not be supported. The public broadcasting system series Race: The Power of Illusion details these DNA studies of different racial groups and found that there was more genetic diversity within various racial groups than between them. Thus, when we talk about some people being black, white, brown, red, and so on, we are discussing social constructs and categories that have been given relative economic, political, and cultural value. This week, we look at whiteness in relationship to other racial categories. And there we are not primarily focusing on whiteness as a skin color or white individuals versus people of other races, but rather at the relatively high value that historically has been given and is still afforded to people who are identified as white in relationships. We are discussing white as a social construct. As Omi and Wynant say in their article, the significance of race is found not in biology, but in the social construct, the relative weight and power given to various groups based on their racial categorization. It's complex stuff to wrap our minds around, but if we're ever to address the problem of racism and racial hierarchies in this country, we need to make sure that we're addressing the right problem. So this week we're going to revisit the story of the space traders. Only this time we're going to read it and analyze it from the perspective of critical whiteness studies, a subset and offshoot of critical race theory. And in this we're seeking to understand how whites and whiteness have been made normal and superior, and thus depreciated the value of people who are identified with other racial categories. I look forward to our interaction together and learning from each other.